Meg 2, starring Jason Statham. Oh, Meg 2, The Trench. Sorry, let's get
Trench.
official here. I don't want to leave that out. This is, of course, the sequel to The Meg. And so to preface this, I'll start on this one. The first Meg, typically movies like this, man, like I think I saw it just because I already had the AMC pass, so I was like, let me just go see it. And the first one was way more entertaining than I expected it to be. I had like really low expectations for the first one. It just looked like a terrible premise.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, just ridiculous, and it's just not my typical type of film. But I actually found it surprisingly, what's the word?
Fine.
Fine, yeah.
It was fine.
The appetite, I surprisingly had enough appetite for it. And Rainn Wilson was in that one, right? Like Rainn Wilson was kind of funny. And just Jason Statham in general, like I thought did a really good job. And I was like, okay, this movie's not.
It's a megalodon.
Yeah, this movie works. That's pretty good, Pete. So this one, again, kind of, I had a little bit better expectation to go see this one. And this is not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. I can nitpick this one a lot more than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But here's a couple things that I did like about this movie. One, I did really like this deeper, like ocean exploration aspect to it. That was kind of a cool element. We don't get a ton of movies that do that kind of stuff. And so I kind of enjoyed, there's a moment where I almost got lost into like a different movie. I almost thought I was watching like The Abyss for a quick moment. It's like, oh crap, we're going undersea, like deep. And okay, let me finish. It's not The Abyss. So again, just be very clear on that. I said a moment. There was like a 5-minute moment where I'm like, oh, okay, this is a little different than direction that I thought it was going to go. And the action's kind of cool. There's some okay scenes in it, but I think where the movie just kind of tails off, the villain I thought was just weak.
Terrible.
Kind of the twist, it just didn't make any sense. On like, there's too much at stake for these people to just risk all this. Like, I mean, they're way under the sea, risking their lives, and it's just like, who would do that? Like that. You could not make enough money to do all that. It just seemed very kind of shallow with the thing. And then there's a couple. The mercenaries were some of the worst mercenaries I've ever seen in my life. Like their fighting skills were poor. Like, can you guys hire some soldiers to they look like they never held a gun before? It was again just little nitpicky things, like, just come on guys, like hire the right people to do this job. But again, like when it got back kind of to its thing with Jason Statham riding on a thing, it got a little bit more entertaining. But yeah, I mean, again, this movie's not going to be for everybody. I have a very tepid recommendation. If you have the AMC pass, I think you can enjoy the night.
Up to 3 movies a week.
Yeah. You can watch some Sharky.
I got to be honest, like this movie, I think the problem with this movie is the fact that it was the first 60% of the movie was this completely different movie that had nothing to do. You only had bits and pieces of like these giant sharks that are these megalodons that are, the movie's called Meg, right? It's called Meg 2. It really did feel like they had like 5 or 6 different movie ideas, and they're like, let's just combine them. You know what I mean? Let's just kind of put them together and make a movie, because by the time you actually get to the Megs and the sharks and all of that, then you have another large creature. I won't spoil it for anybody. You have another large creature that comes out of the trench. Then it turns into like Jurassic World, but an awful version of it for like the last 20 minutes of the movie, and it was really just poorly done. Especially the main bad girl. She should have like tried to get away in a helicopter and been eaten by a shark. That would have been a better death for her than to be killed by a bunch of those little creatures that nobody cares about.
Spoiler,
like Jurassic Park.
Spoiler.
I'm not spoiling it. There's nothing to spoil in this movie. Let's just, okay, here's the movie. Jason Statham, and there's a bunch of new big giant sharks, and he doesn't die at the end. That's the movie. Like that's literally the movie. This is I had no expectation for this movie because the first one was, I mean, it was fine, you know what I mean? But this was weighing. I put too much stake in CG, and the idea of a big giant shark, and let's add 5 now in this movie, and as well as another giant creature. It's just wow, the amount of money they spent on this film. Because there was like a couple scenes where the composition really wasn't that good, where you can tell that the person really wasn't in that environment. You know what I mean? And it just threw me off. And for that budget, I feel like you can composite something a little bit cleaner. You know what I mean? There were some intense moments, and there's like moments where you're like, oh my gosh, but
yeah.
Overall, it's go and see it if you love these kind of movies.
Yeah. I think that's it. Like, don't go out of your way. But if this is your cup of tea, I think it'll be okay. I don't think anybody's walking out of this loving this film, but I think it's, again, I do think they spent way too much money. It just goes to, again, like the rule of filmmaking, like just because you have more money doesn't mean you should just spend it. Like spend it the right way, like make things. There's a couple great practical scenes that I kind of enjoyed, like Jason Statham was on the Sea-Doo as opposed to like, they had like the camera actually on him and he was doing it like
it's almost like a GoPro.
Yeah, like I enjoyed that. I like seeing more stuff like that where it's like, again, especially when this movie, some of the other stuff is a lot of CGI. It's like it's great to see some non-CGI stuff.
Yeah. I would just like to see a movie like this, where you go into it with expectations that there's going to be some real ridiculous moments. I wish that somebody would make a movie like this where you think it's going to be ridiculous and they don't do something ridiculous. Like they actually make it legit, right? Like, I don't know. There's like moments in these movies. It's so silly.
Well, we talked about The Abyss before this, right? And yes, obviously that's James Cameron, and James Cameron's not directing this, but at the same time, they're very similar concepts. And it's like, why not go that route and make it more about these characters? And then, you're replacing aliens with sharks. And so you're crafting your story around needing to go down this exploration. And like, that's what made The Abyss so good. Now I kind of want to watch The Abyss again. But yeah, this movie could have just taken more of a serious tone and been good because, again, there's not a ton of movie about deep sea exploration, and especially in the modern, like with all the new technology we have. It got really interesting, and then like you're saying, it just veered off and went ridiculous as opposed to
boring. I mean, that whole time, I mean, you're just waiting for something to happen, and it just kept going and going, and it's just like, oh man, give me some sharks.
Well, and like when they discovered the city too, or the lair underneath, there was an opportunity there to actually make it very interesting, but then they just kind of went the easy way out, and it's like, oh, we're just trying to make more money, and it's like, okay, like that's not deep at all, and yeah.
They barely, like in the first one, they barely made these suits and these ships that could actually go to that depth where you can survive. And then in this one, they actually have suits where you can just, that's like the new technology. Like to be that deep, you can't possibly survive. Yeah. But for some reason, somebody secretly was able to build this really giant underground facility. Nobody knows it's happening. It's so silly.
Yeah, and like I said, it should have been more like conspiracy angled versus like secret, if that makes sense. Like it should have been more like government type of conspiracy.
Yeah, I think.
But again, it went the way
too much time on this film.
All right, yeah, let's move on.